October in Chicago was a season when the chilly wind stung your cheeks. Emma Miller stood in the kitchen of her small apartment, brewing her third cup of coffee while gazing out the window. The leaves on the street trees were beginning to turn golden, and the footsteps of people walking on the sidewalk seemed somehow more hurried than usual. Her mornings always began with the aroma of this coffee. 3 years had passed since she became independent as a graphic designer. What had initially been a freelance life filled with anxiety was now beginning to find its rhythm. She had worked on logos, brochures, and website designs for various clients, from small startups to major corporations. She specialized in branding for environmentally conscious companies, and recently work had been coming in through word of mouth. Emma's apartment was located in a quiet residential area in the suburbs. It was spacious enough for living alone, with a work area set up in one corner of the living room where the latest computer and large monitor were arranged. Prints of her work were neatly displayed on the walls, and the bookshelves were packed tight with design-related professional books. The result of prioritizing work over romance was evident in this space. While friends her age were getting married one after another and having children, Emma had walked her own path. On weekends, she often visited her parents' home, about an hour's drive away. Her parents, John and Margaret, worried about Emma's single life. Especially her mother Margaret, who sometimes became nagging in her concern for her daughter's future. "Emma, don't you think it's about time you found someone nice and started a family?" Her mother had said the same thing last Sunday. Emma knew that the words, "Katie had built such a wonderful family," would follow. Every time her mother brought up Katie, a sharp pain ran through Emma's chest. Emma's younger sister Katie had been a beautiful woman with chestnut curls and large brown eyes. She had majored in biology in college and pursued a doctoral program to become a researcher. In contrast to Emma, Katie had been pursued by many men since her student days and eventually married a university friend. She was the pride and joy of their parents. However, that happiness didn't last long. 5 years ago, on a snowy night, Katie lost her life in a traffic accident. She was 27 at the time. It was far too young to die. For Emma, Katie was her only sister and one of her most precious family members. Their relationship was more like best friends than sisters. After Katie's death, the entire family was enveloped in deep sorrow that still hasn't completely healed. Emma sometimes wondered what kind of life Katie would have led if she were still alive. She surely would have become an excellent researcher. She might have been surrounded by children, building a happy family. Every time she imagined this, complex emotions swirled in Emma's heart. Love for her sister, and at the same time, the pressure of having to bear her parents' expectations alone. After finishing her coffee, Emma headed to her work desk. She had an important presentation scheduled for the afternoon. It was a branding project for a new organic food company, and if successful...
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit Stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
It could become the year's biggest contract. Emma took a deep breath and turned on her computer. By concentrating on work, she had been distracting herself from daily loneliness and complex feelings about her family. Monday morning began as usual with the cheerful sound of the coffee maker. Emma held a steaming mug in her hand and opened her laptop to start checking emails. There were 3 new job requests that had arrived over the weekend. One was for menu design from a small local restaurant, another was for brochure production from an environmental protection group, and the third was an unexpectedly large project. It was from a mid-sized construction company based in Chicago that was considering revamping their corporate image. Emma carefully reread each request while sipping her coffee. The construction company project was large in scale, and if successful, it would significantly impact her future work. She wrote the schedule in her planner and decided on priorities. She had learned over these 3 years that such systematic work was the secret to success as a freelancer. In the morning, she concentrated on the restaurant's menu design. What the client wanted was a design that conveyed both the warmth of a family-run business and a sophisticated impression. Emma redrew sketches many times, adjusting colors and fonts. She became so absorbed in her work that she forgot about lunch, and before she knew it, it was past 2 in the afternoon. She hurriedly made a simple sandwich and began preparing for the online meeting scheduled for 3 o'clock. The other party was a representative from an environmental protection group, and they were scheduled to discuss brochure production for a global warming prevention campaign to be held next month. For Emma, work related to environmental issues held special meaning. During her lifetime, Katie had passionately spoken about the importance of environmental protection through her biological research. About 30 minutes into the meeting, Emma's cell phone rang. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. Since she was in a meeting, Emma ignored the call and continued the discussion. However, the same number kept calling repeatedly after that. 5 calls came in 5-minute intervals, for a total of 4 times. "I'm sorry," Emma apologized to her meeting partner. "This might be an emergency, so could I have a moment?" The other party showed understanding, and Emma temporarily suspended the meeting. However, the moment she tried to answer the phone, the incoming call stopped. Emma tilted her head in confusion and returned to the meeting. The representative from the Environmental Protection Group was a kind woman who explained the brochure concept in detail. She wanted a design that balanced the beauty of nature with human responsibility. The meeting ended after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Emma immediately checked her call history and called back the unknown number. However, only the ringing tone continued, and no one answered. There was no connection to voicemail service either, and Emma hung up with suspicion. Even into the evening, there were no more calls from that number. Emma began researching the construction company project. Looking at the company's website, she found it was a historic company with 50 years of establishment that had recently been focusing on environmentally conscious construction technology. This looked like it would be an interesting project, Emma thought with growing expectations. Around 6 o'clock, while making a simple dinner, Emma reflected on the day's events. The mysterious phone calls bothered her, but she concluded they were probably wrong numbers. Working as a freelancer, she received contacts from various people, and sometimes there were wrong numbers. After dinner, Emma decided to check her answering machine. She rarely used the answering machine function on her old landline phone, but perhaps there was an important message. When she pressed the button, a mechanical voice played. "You have one message." Emma listened with interest. "This is the Chicago Police Department. Is this Ms. Emma Miller? We have an urgent matter that requires your phone call. We're sorry to bother you when you're busy, but please contact us as soon as possible. The number is..." Emma's hands trembled. A call from the police. Surely there must be some mistake. She hadn't done anything that violated the law. She had no memory of traffic violations, and recently she hadn't even had a parking ticket. Or had something happened to her parents? Anxiety suddenly gripped her heart. Emma hurriedly took notes while listening to the message again. It was definitely from the Chicago Police Department, and they had called her name. When she checked the number, it was the same number that had called multiple times in the afternoon. With trembling hands, Emma called the police station. After several rings, a woman's voice answered. "Chicago Police Department. This is Emma Miller. I believe you left a voicemail, so I'm calling you back. Please hold a moment." After some silence, it switched to another woman's voice. "Ms. Miller, thank you for calling. Actually, we have an important matter we need to inform you about." Emma's heartbeat quickened. "What happened?" "We have your 3-year-old son in our custody. Could you come to pick him up?" Emma doubted her ears for a moment. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "We have your son, a 3-year-old boy, in our custody. Your name and contact information were listed as the emergency contact." "But I don't have any children," Emma's voice was filled with confusion. "Isn't there some mistake?" There was silence on the other end of the phone for a while. "Ms. Miller, could you please come here once?" We'll explain the detailed situation. The child also seems to want to meet you. Emma's mind was in chaos. She was certain she had no children. However, it was hard to believe the police would make such a mistake. What on earth was happening? I understand. I'll come right away, Emma answered. Which police station is it? After confirming the address, Emma hurriedly got ready. While putting on her coat and grabbing her car keys, her mind raced through various possibilities. Had someone used her name falsely? Or had she been mistaken for another person with the same name? While driving through Chicago's night streets, Emma was enveloped in anxiety and confusion. Between the reality that a 3-year-old child was in police custody and her certainty that she had no connection to that child, her heart wavered. The Chicago Police Department building emanated an intimidating presence, illuminated by the night's neon lights. Emma got out of her car and shivered in the cold autumn wind. She took a deep breath in front of the building before pushing open the heavy glass door. A middle-aged police officer sat at the reception desk, and when Emma gave her name, he immediately led her inside. Walking down the hallway, Emma's heart was beating violently. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows on the floor, and footsteps echoed on the hard tiles. "You're Ms. Miller." When she turned around, a female police officer was standing there. Although her expression in uniform was professional, it somehow held a sympathetic color. Her name tag read, Deputy Rodriguez. "Yes, I'm Emma Miller. I came regarding the matter we discussed on the phone. Thank you for coming. First, let me briefly explain the situation. Please come this way." Deputy Rodriguez led Emma to a small conference room. Chairs were placed facing each other at the table, and posters about regional safety were posted on the walls. When they sat down, the deputy opened a file. "Around 2 o'clock this afternoon, we received a report from a neighborhood resident. They said a 3-year-old boy was wandering alone in a residential area. When we responded, we indeed found a small boy walking around crying." Emma listened silently. She still couldn't understand the situation. The boy showed symptoms of malnutrition and had multiple bruises on his body. He was immediately taken to the hospital for examination. Fortunately, his life isn't in danger, but he clearly hadn't been receiving proper care. "That's terrible, but," Emma said in confusion, "I don't understand my relationship to that child." Deputy Rodriguez took out a small plastic bag. Inside was a small silver locket. The child was clutching this locket. "When we opened it, we found a piece of paper inside with your name and contact information written on it." Emma stared at the locket. It was old silver with a small rose pattern engraved on the surface. She felt like she had seen it somewhere before, but couldn't remember. "Could I see that paper?" The deputy took out a small piece of paper. Emma's name, phone number, and address were indeed written in careful handwriting. However, the handwriting wasn't hers. "This isn't my handwriting. I don't know who wrote it either. Ms. Miller, please meet the child once. You might understand something." Emma nodded. She had no other choice. The two walked down the hallway toward another room. The room had a plaque that read, "Visiting Room." When Deputy Rodriguez knocked on the door, a woman's voice from inside said, "Come in." "Are you ready?" the deputy confirmed with Emma. Emma took a deep breath. "I'm fine." The door opened. In the center of the room was a small table and chairs, with a female staff member sitting there. And beyond the table, a small boy was standing. Emma gasped. The child was indeed about 3 years old. Chestnut curls danced around his head, and large brown eyes gazed at Emma. A slightly upturned small nose, plump cheeks. His clothes were dirty, but his features were beautiful. However, what shocked Emma wasn't his beauty. "Katie." Emma unconsciously murmured her sister's name. The boy in front of her looked exactly like Katie as a child. As if a photograph had stepped out of an old album. The same chestnut curls, the same large brown eyes, the same facial expressions. The boy looked up at Emma and tried to say something in a small voice. However, he couldn't form words and just continued to gaze at her with his large eyes. "Ms. Miller, is something wrong?" Deputy Rodriguez asked with concern. Emma slowly sat down in a chair. Her legs had lost their strength. This child is. Do you recognize him?" Emma continued to stare at the boy. Since she had looked at photos of Katie at age 3 many times, there was no mistake. This child's features were identical to her sister as a young child. "What's your name?" Emma gently spoke to the boy. The boy was shy at first, but eventually answered in a small voice. "Ryan. Ryan. You must have been scared." The boy nodded. Then he showed Emma the small locket he was holding. "Mama gave me this. It's important." Emma's heart was in violent turmoil. If this child was Katie's child, it would mean Katie had a secret child. However, that was impossible. Katie died in an accident soon after getting married. She had never heard of her being pregnant. "Ryan, where is Mama?" Emma asked in a trembling voice. "Heaven," the boy answered sadly. "She became a star." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. This child had lost his mother. And for some reason, he looked exactly like Katie. "We asked the adoptive parents about the circumstances," the female staff member explained. "This child's birth mother died several years ago. The adoptive parents said they didn't know the details." Emma stood up and knelt in front of Ryan. She gently held the boy's small hands. "Ryan, don't be afraid. Everything's going to be okay now." Ryan smiled for the first time. That smile was exactly the same as Katie's smile in Emma's memory. "Ms. Miller," Deputy Rodriguez spoke to her. "Did you understand anything?" Emma stood up while wiping away tears. "Could you do a DNA test? I want to confirm whose child this is." "Of course. It will take some time, but we'll arrange it." Emma looked at Ryan once more. Why had this small life appeared before her? And why did he resemble Katie so much? "Where will he stay tonight?" "He'll be temporarily housed at a child protection facility. The test results should take several days." Emma nodded. Then she spoke to Ryan once more. "Ryan, I'll come see you again tomorrow, okay? That's a promise." The boy nodded vigorously. When leaving the police station, Emma's heart was in confusion. However, there was one thing she was certain of. There was definitely Katie's shadow in that child. And if this child was Katie's child, she had a responsibility to protect him. In the car, Emma took out her cell phone. She had to contact her parents. She couldn't bear this mysterious event alone. However, before making the call, Emma thought deeply. If Ryan really was Katie's child, why hadn't Katie told anyone about it? The autumn night wind was beating against the car windows. Emma looked up at the sky. Several stars were shining. Just as Ryan had said, Katie might have become a star. And now, she might have entrusted her child to Emma. Emma started the car. While waiting for the DNA test results, she had many things she needed to do. 3 days later in the morning, Emma's cell phone rang. The screen showed the Chicago Police Department's number. Her heart beat violently. "Ms. Miller, this is Deputy Rodriguez. The DNA test results are in. Could you come when you have time?" Emma felt her hands trembling. "I'll come right away." On the way to the police station, Emma considered various possibilities. If Ryan really was Katie's child, it would mean her sister had hidden a secret 5 years ago. However, there was no other explanation. That child's features were exactly like Katie as a young child. When she arrived at the police station, Deputy Rodriguez was waiting. Her expression was serious. "Ms. Miller, please sit down." In the conference room, the deputy opened a file. "The DNA test results confirmed that Ryan is your nephew." Although Emma had expected it, hearing it again took her breath away. "So he's Katie's child?" "Yes. There's no mistake." However, when we investigated the adoption records, a complex situation came to light. The deputy took out another file. Ryan was put up for adoption 3 years ago, when he was just born. According to the adoption papers, the birth mother's name is Katie Miller. Your name is listed as the emergency contact. Emma received the documents. Katie's name was indeed there, and her own contact information was also written. Looking at the date, it was 3 years and 2 months ago. It was during the time when Katie was absorbed in her doctoral research. But Katie was married. Why adoption? We investigated that as well. In the father's column, there's a name, Robert Harris. He appears to be a university professor. Emma's memory came back. Robert Harris. He was Katie's supervising professor. A married man in his mid-40s, and Katie had been writing her doctoral thesis in his laboratory. Also, there's a report about the adoptive parents. The deputy's expression became even more serious. Ryan was taken in by James and Sarah Coleman. Initially, they were evaluated as a loving couple, but the situation deteriorated over the past year or so. Emma swallowed hard as she listened. Sarah Coleman suffered from alcoholism, and James Coleman became violent due to work stress. There were several reports from neighbors, and we had issued warnings. So that's why Ryan was wandering the streets alone. Yes. The Coleman couple are currently under arrest on charges of child abuse. Ryan will never return to them. Emma held her head. She couldn't understand why Katie had made such a decision. "Could I speak with Professor Harris? I'd like to meet him." "Of course. We've already contacted him, and he's prepared to meet with you." That afternoon, Emma visited the university campus. The biology department building where Katie had studied was old brick construction with ivy climbing on it. The autumn afternoon sunlight cast warm shadows on the building. Professor Robert Harris's laboratory was on the 3rd floor. When she knocked on the door, a tired voice said, "Come in." When she entered the room, a man over 50 stood up. His face was pale, with deep dark circles under his eyes. Having received contact from the police, he seemed to already understand the situation. "You're Ms. Emma Miller, Katie's sister." Professor Harris's voice was trembling. "Yes. I came about Ryan." Professor Harris collapsed into his chair. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." He covered his face with his hands. I caused Katie to suffer." Emma sat in the chair across from him. "Please tell me what happened." After a long silence, Professor Harris began to speak. "Katie was an excellent student. Her doctoral research was progressing well, and I was confident she would become a promising researcher. However, despite being married, I fell in love with her." Emma listened silently. At first, it was the relationship between a supervising professor and student. However, we often found ourselves alone together during long research hours, and gradually we began talking about personal matters. I was the one who pursued the relationship. Katie was confused at first, but she became pregnant. Yes. When Katie confessed her pregnancy, I was shaken. Considering my wife and family, it wasn't a relationship I could make public. Katie had to bear that burden alone. Professor Harris's voice became even smaller. She didn't want to give up her path as a researcher. However, she also couldn't have an abortion. For several months, she continued to suffer alone. Emma's heart ached. Just imagining how much Katie had suffered made her chest feel like it would burst. Why did she decide on adoption? Katie said she wanted to entrust the child to a loving family. She said she couldn't provide an adequate environment herself. And Professor Harris choked on his words. She talked about you. About me? Yes. She knew you were suffering from infertility treatments at the time. She really wanted to consult with you. However, she said she didn't want to hurt you. Emma felt tears overflowing. Katie had been considerate of her sister to the very end. Writing your name as the emergency contact was also Katie's will. She said, if anything happens, please contact Sister Emma. Did Katie ever meet Ryan? Just once. Right after putting him up for adoption, she held him briefly at the hospital. She was crying. She kept saying, I hope this child will be happy. Emma stood up. She couldn't listen to any more. Professor Harris, I've already decided to resign from the university. I've also started divorce discussions with my wife. I want to somehow take responsibility for making Katie suffer and making Ryan unhappy. Emma left the laboratory without saying anything. In the evening, Emma visited the child protection facility. Ryan was playing alone in a small playroom. When he saw Emma, he ran over to her. Aunt Emma. Ryan called her that naturally. Emma hugged him. Ryan, would you like to live with Aunt Emma? Really? Ryan's eyes sparkled. Yes. Let's be together forever. That night, Emma called her parents. Her parents were initially surprised to learn of their grandson's existence, but eventually shed tears. Her mother Margaret cried over the phone and said, Katie was thinking of everyone to the very end. We will love our grandson. We'll support you with all our strength. The next day, Emma began procedures with Child Protective Services. She prepared documents to become Ryan's legal guardian and proceeded with the process to take him in. A week later, Emma returned to her apartment holding hands with Ryan. It was a small room, but it was where their new life together would begin. Ryan, this is Aunt Emma's home. Ryan looked around the room. Then he found Katie's photo hanging on the wall. Oh, it's Mama. Emma nodded. Yes, it's Mama. She's watching over you from heaven. That night, while putting Ryan to bed, Emma gazed at the small locket. It was the last gift Katie had left. Beyond blood relations, it was proof of love and trust. Thank you, Katie, Emma whispered in her heart. I'll raise Ryan with care. I promise. Outside the window, several stars were shining. One of them seemed particularly bright. 6 months later in spring, Emma and Ryan had moved to a small house in the suburbs. A cherry tree was planted in the garden, and pale pink petals danced in the wind. Ryan was riding a tricycle in the backyard, laughing joyfully. Aunt Emma, look. Ryan skillfully maneuvered his tricycle, showing her how he could make small circles. His thin figure from 6 months ago was nowhere to be seen, and his cheeks had regained a healthy, plump redness. His chestnut curls shone beautifully in the sunlight, and his large brown eyes had a lively sparkle. Very good, Ryan. You're very good, Emma smiled warmly while sitting in a garden chair. In the living room of the new house, a large photo of Katie was displayed. Her sister's smiling figure from the laboratory always watched over Emma and Ryan. Ryan had made it a daily routine to greet the photo every morning, saying, "Good morning, Mama in heaven." Emma's work was also going well. Since taking in Ryan, something had changed within her. The sense of responsibility for family had further heightened her passion for work. Client trust was also strong, and especially for family-oriented branding projects, she could make deep proposals based on real experience. Her parents John and Margaret had also found new purpose in life through their grandson's existence. On weekends, they always came to pick up Ryan and played with him in the park or went to the zoo together. Margaret especially doted on Ryan, saying, "This child looks just like Katie," while making homemade sweets for her grandson. "Aunt Emma, I'm hungry." Ryan got off his tricycle and ran over to Emma. "Well then, shall we have lunch? What would you like to eat today?" "Pancakes." Ryan's eyes sparkled. Emma stood up and took Ryan's hand. While making pancakes in the kitchen, she savored her happiness. It was a life she couldn't have imagined a year ago. Quiet time alone had been precious too, but Ryan's presence brought warm vitality to every day. Ryan was now attending a nearby nursery school. He was initially shy, but with his natural brightness, he made many friends. Teachers reported that he's a very kind child who always tries to help when there are friends in trouble. In the afternoon, Emma was working in her study. While creating a proposal for a new project, Ryan quietly entered the room. "Aunt Emma, working?" "Yes, just a little. I'll be finished soon." Ryan sat in a small chair and opened a picture book. Occasionally, when there were difficult characters, he would ask, "How do you read this?" Emma would stop her work and teach him carefully. In the evening, the two visited Katie's grave. Fresh flowers were already placed in front of the headstone. While adding the spring flowers Emma had brought, Ryan spoke to the headstone. "Mama in heaven, I rode my tricycle today. It was very fun. Aunt Emma made pancakes for me. They were delicious." Emma felt her eyes getting hot. Ryan reported the day's events to Katie every time. "Mama, Ryan is a very good child." Emma placed her hand on the headstone. "You don't need to worry about anything. We all love Ryan and are raising him with care." On the way home, Ryan fell asleep in the car. Emma looked at his sleeping face through the rearview mirror. This child with Katie's features had given new meaning to her life. When they returned home, Emma noticed one message on her cell phone. The sender was Robert Harris. As promised, he had resigned from the university and was currently working in environmental protection in another state. He occasionally sent messages asking about Ryan's condition. "Is Ryan well? I pray that he's growing up happily. I will send support money monthly for his education expenses. This is my responsibility." Emma replied briefly, "Ryan is well. Thank you for your support." That night, after putting Ryan to bed, Emma sat alone in the living room. While gazing at Katie's photo, she reflected on the past 6 months. She had been anxious at first. The weight of responsibility for raising a 3-year-old child, balancing work, anxiety about the future. However, Ryan's presence had enriched her life. The quietness of time spent alone had been precious, but the warmth of having family was irreplaceable. "Thank you, Katie," Emma whispered in her heart. "I will treasure the last gift you left me for the rest of my life." Outside the window, stars shone in the spring night sky. One of them seemed particularly bright as always. Emma smiled. Katie was always watching over them. And she surely blessed the new life they were walking together with Ryan.